All right. Well, this is a motivated crowd coming to a metrics discussion at 4:15 before cocktail hour. Thank you very much. I'm very impressed. So my name is Ana Riccio, and I'm the SVP of Global Recruiting at Salesforce, and I'm here with my colleague, Ernest Ng, who runs our predictive analytics team, as well as one of our very favorite customers and partners, Christian Scott. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about getting disruptive in recruiting. Ha-cha-cha-cha. So, Salesforce has always been, oh, I got my clicker. Hold on a minute. Salesforce has always been a very disruptive company. Our entire vision started on 3 disruptive pillars. The first one is our technology model. Salesforce pioneered cloud computing. And what this means is that companies no longer had to invest in hardware, in software. The barriers to entry into deploying an enterprise solution were pretty much mitigated. This allowed small to medium-sized companies to be able to take on an enterprise solution, which is pretty fabulous. We also introduce a new business model that is software as a service. And again, the reason why this is so important and meaningful to our business is that it allowed companies to be able to pay as they grow. So no longer that massive investment in lots of IT people or operations, or more importantly, those nutty 18-month implementation cycles. That was totally eliminated. The last pillar is actually my personal favorite. It's our 1-1-1 model. 1% of our total equity goes back to nonprofits and to charities. That's pretty significant when you think about how wildly successful Salesforce has been. This company is rounding out, we're pretty close to having given back $1 billion back into our communities. That's a big boy B, $1 billion. That's huge, huge. All right, thank you. Pretty impressive. We also give back 1% of our product sales back to nonprofits and to charities so that they too can accelerate their business. And lastly, 1% of our employees' time goes back to the community, to their communities, and to the nonprofits of their choice. And that, again, is pretty significant, because at Salesforce, directors and above have unlimited vacation. So let me tell you right now, they're losing money on me, because I take a lot of vacation. But for our individual contributors, they get 3 weeks vacation on day 1. But with this particular pillar, they also get 6 more days to give back to their schools, to their whatever, soup kitchens, whatever they'd like. So Salesforce was born disruptive in our cloud technology, but also in 2009, with the advent of our product Chatter, we brought social media to the enterprise space. And this allowed companies to collaborate real time and to give each other the gift of feedback real time, and to also iterate and collaborate real time. Pretty crazy stuff. In 2012, we moved all of our products to your mobile phone and also to your tablet. There is nothing that you can't do on your laptop that you can't do on your mobile phone. As a matter of fact, when I travel, I don't even take my laptop with me anymore. I do everything 100% on my phone. I can run my entire business. Again, super impressive. In 2013, we completed our largest acquisition. We acquired a company called ExactTarget. ExactTarget allows our customers to track their customers and to create customer journeys. Couple that with our most recent acquisition of RelateIQ and with our analytics cloud, which we just unveiled at Dreamforce last week during our user conference. Those interactions now are creating meaning, insights, and we'll be able to see the behaviors of our customers, which once again is accelerating our business. We're pretty excited about those disruptive things. We are $5 billion in revenue, $5 billion in revenue. And think back that I just mentioned to you that we've also given back $1 billion. So that's, again, pretty impressive. 15,000 employees. We are the fastest growing enterprise software company in the world. We are growing at 33% year over year. There is not another enterprise software company in the world growing at our scale or at our pace. Crazy, 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 crazy. Forbes has also given us the #1 most innovative company in the world 4 years in a row. Fortune gave us the top 100 most best companies to work for. We're ranked #7 for the last 6 years. And a little known fact, that Hinge, are you guys familiar with Hinge? They've also have given us the best looking company last year. We're most impressed by that. Oh yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, what does it take to be this successful, to engage, to retain, and to attract employees? Well, Ernest here is going to tell you a little bit about the insights and methodologies that we use. Ernest?
Thank you, Anna. If you think about all of that success that we've had, it really starts with our customers and focusing on customer success as the #1 key priority. And to really get customers to be successful, you need very engaged employees, and that's a real focus on employee success, right? And that's all about optimizing the type of people that you bring in, the type of people that work for your company, and the culture that you create, right? And so that's getting harder and harder by the day, right? You see this study by Gallup, it shows 13% of the global workforce is engaged. That is a scary, scary number. You see 63% disengaged and 24% actively disengaged, meaning, these are people who are potentially sandbagging, sabotaging your company, right? You want to minimize that as much as possible. And when we thought about it and we looked at these numbers, we really said, we can't fall into that trap, right? I don't believe we are at that number, but once you think you've made it, once you think you're at the top, that's when you're ready to tank to the bottom, right? Because ultimately, it's really about rethinking how you go about doing HR, how you go about doing recruiting to make sure that this scenario doesn't happen in your company. And that's exactly what we tried to do. And so we really rethought, what does it mean to be a recruiting organization? What does it mean to be a HR organization? And how to be really disruptive about that, right? And so are you ready to get disruptive and hear how we've started to get disruptive? Yes.
Give me an amen.
So when we talk about disruption, let's just ground ourselves in what that really means. So the classical business schools term would be finding new markets or discovering new value networks, right? Looking at where incumbents have sort of overlooked. And I think in some respects, we could call ourselves incumbents in certain spaces, and we don't want to be disrupted, so we have to currently disrupt ourselves, and that's really what we're doing. And so when you seek to disrupt your environment, data becomes the differentiator, right? Disruption is all about changing long-standing beliefs, changing the way people approach their business. And data is the key to really disrupting that, right? Data is the key to create that cognitive dissonance in your client's mind where they're like, maybe I should look at this a little bit differently, right? And so that's what we have. We have so much data in our ATSs, in our HRISs, in our Salesforce systems, in LinkedIn as well, that sometimes it gets to be a little bit overwhelming, right? And it's hard to drive action when you just have data. And so it's really about crossing that data divide with stories and analyses and really robust conversations that come out of this analysis, right? And so that's really how you start to get disruptive, how you start to break down walls and break myths and really start to move the business forward in very constructive conversations. So we're going to take you through 3 use cases about how we took data, led with data, and started to break down those walls and to break down those myths around really where we recruit, who we recruit, and how we recruit.
All right, so they're bringing in the disruptive one here. So it wasn't always, let's see here. It wasn't always unicorns and rainbows at Salesforce. We started to notice some not so positive trends in our tech recruiting stats in Q4 of last year. And we started to see a little bit more heightened declines. So we went to the business and we said, hey, listen, I think we've got a bit of an issue. And I'm sure all of you guys have heard this before. They said, well, you got to hire better recruiters. And we said, no. This isn't about our ability to close candidates or abilities to sell a particular role. I think that we're starting to see some really heightened competition. And frankly, I think we're starting to see some market penetration issues. And once again, they said, nah. You got to get more aggressive with your offers. You got to drop your shorts. And trust me, I'm not afraid to get aggressive with an offer. I'm not afraid to drop my shorts. We knew this wasn't a matter about being competitive. We really knew that there was something more here. But we didn't really quite know how to have that conversation, really, how to bust, that myth. So Rhonda Mihalik, who runs our tech recruiting team, and with Valerie Cloaker on her team, they sat down and really started to think about the addressable market. And they actually went really deep with this. So they took a look at the addressable market and came back with, here we go. And figured out that there was about 82,000 people out there who could work at Salesforce. And that seems like an awful lot. So of those 82,000, we really, again, started to refine that. How many of them really had the skills to work in our organization? How many of them really, could we bring on? But then this is where it got really interesting. They developed, along with Ernest's team and their big brains, the hairiest, the gnarliest, the most craziest algorithm. And they cross-referenced those 82,000 people who could potentially work at Salesforce against our applicant tracking system. Not just our applicant tracking system, they took it a step further. They went through all the Excel spreadsheets. You've got stuff on Excel spreadsheets. They've gone the Google Docs, on napkins, on sticky notes, you name it, and they entered this information. And what they came back with is that 23% of the market had been touched by Salesforce at some point in the last 2 years. That is huge when you start to talk about those numbers. Because at the end of the day, we only want to hire the top 20%. And here we'd already touched 23%. So already, there's a pretty significant addressable market that had already been interviewed by us, was already in our CRMs, had already been talking to us, or frankly, may have already declined us, which, those were the dumb ones. But anyways, it happens, right? It happens to the best of us. So we were able to go back to the business with data and to really disrupt those myths and to sit down with them and say, we actually, have an issue because in the Bay Area, I think that we're pretty saturated. But look at all of these other markets where there are people who have the exact skills that we're looking for that we haven't even contacted. And so as a result, you're going to see a pretty significant paradigm shift at Salesforce, and we're going to start seeing some investments in areas where we normally wouldn't have a development site. So for example, you'll start to see an expanded footprint in Vancouver. So if you've got a Vancouver site over there, we'll be gunning for you. But again, can you imagine that recruiting led that discussion? And we're thrilled by those results. The second example I want to talk about is over on the account executive side of the house. This is our sales side. If you asked any account executive, if you asked any account executive if they thought that what the number one skill that they needed, they will all tell you that it's enterprise software experience. That is the secret sauce to being a great account executive. Truthfully, they think that Jesus Christ himself was an account executive who had enterprise software experience. And we were like, absolutely not. That's not the case. That's not the secret sauce. But once again, we really didn't have the data to lead that discussion. You'll see here that in San Francisco alone, 28% of that market's already been touched by our recruiters and by our awesome sourcing team. But in Boston, only 4%. So they said, well, all right, maybe you should go to Boston and find us more enterprise software people. But we knew that really wasn't the answer either. So the team, led by Natalie Scardino, and her team, which she affectionately refers to as the bean counters, they actually did a deep dive. They took a look at the top 100 account executives at Salesforce. They interviewed them, they looked at their LinkedIn profiles, they followed them, and they really did some very in-depth analysis. And they came back with some very interesting conclusions. The first one is that they came back with 3 distinctive things that all of our successful account executives had in common. The first one is that they came from close cadence. That's really the most important one. They were used to the pace of being measured monthly, of hitting monthly goals, which again is really important to be successful at Salesforce. The second common denominator were individuals who had come from a storytelling or a Sandler training type of philosophy. This is the sales training that we use at Salesforce. These individuals had come with that type of background. And then the third one is that they all came from a heavy CRM background. They'd either worked for a CRM company or they were heavy users. Of course, the team wasn't satisfied, although let me tell you, they were pretty victorious. There was a little champagne and a little like high-fiving and I told you so going on over on the 5th floor. But we took it one step further. And wouldn't you know it, that out of that top 100, 34% of them did not come from an enterprise software background. They came from pharmaceutical, they came from retail, they came from biotech, they came from the mortgage industry. So pretty interesting. Even one step further to that, of the top 10%, 7 of them came from unconventional backgrounds as well. So we were really able to expand that profile and to really, again, go back to the business and have a different discussion with them. Sure, we can go to Boston, we can go to the moon, and we can look for enterprise software. Nobody's probably recruited anyone there yet. And we could do that, but at the end of the day, that's not going to yield, a guaranteed better hire when we actually do know what the 3 common denominators are. And so as a result, we've expanded our profile, which is great. And I'd like to introduce you to Christian Scott, who's one of our very, very, very favorite clients. And I think he's been a great benefactor of this expanded profile. And he's going to share with you a little bit about what it's been like working with the recruiting team. Christian?
Great. Well, thanks. I think we're all part of this kind of conundrum where there's just not enough talent out there. And I don't care how you slice it, how you say it. But when we actually look at the talent that Salesforce is trying to strive for, we're looking for that top 20%. And the reality is that the top 20% that we're all going for, they're gainfully employed. There's a reason why they're in the top 20%, and chances are they're not going to leave because they're making a lot of money. So how do we try to change the equation a little bit? We certainly want to go after that 20%. We want to have a lot of success going after them. But I think we actually have to redefine what that 20% is. Let's go and look for the 20% in other industries, for example. So one thing that we've done at Salesforce is I've gone out and I've looked at retail. We've looked at biotech. We've looked at other non-traditional markets instead of just classic enterprise software sales. Because I would much rather have the top 20% in all of those other industries than maybe the second 20 or the third 20 in software sales. And that's just the reality of the game that we're in right now. And so I think that's just something that I've seen, and it's been a huge success working with your team on this.
Oh, thank you. Can you comment at all on the quality of hire or the ability of these individuals to ramp? Because at the end of the day, they don't have that enterprise software experience. So what it's been like training these individuals?
Yeah, I think I'm set here too.
I want everybody to really hear you.
Yeah, double mic.
Yeah.
It's pretty important, yeah. I think this is where the actual interview process becomes that much more important. So if we go and look for non-traditional backgrounds, that makes this interview process even that much more important, because we talk about kind of the 3 criteria that we look at, but the reality is that we need to be able to make sure that they can do business inside of our businesses, that they can do cadence, that they can do storytelling, they do these things. But the reality is, getting them through the front door is the easiest part of this. It's now making sure through the interview process that they in fact can play in a non-traditional, to them, non-traditional environment. So I think that's really a big part of it. I think we also have to make sure that when we're bringing people out of non-traditional environments, we're empowering them in the right ways, that we're putting them through these storytelling trainings if they haven't gone through. But I'll tell you one thing, I can teach someone how to be proficient at Salesforce. I can teach them about technology. It's pretty hard for me to teach them to be a good salesperson. There are some inherent DNA elements there that are consistent through all really good salespeople, and there's not a whole lot I can do to manipulate that DNA, but I can teach you technology. So a good case in point is, pulled a guy out of, how many Dolce & Gabbana fans are out there? Any fashionistas? Okay.
Look at all the women raise their hands.
So,
you see that? That was awesome.
Yeah. So would you think that a person who was running a sales team at Dolce & Gabbana could turn around and sell software as a service for Salesforce.com? Probably not. That guy right now is my top sales guy inside my entire business across the retail, across North America for me. And that is on a 9-month ramp, only been in the business 9 months. So it just tells you that if you can find the right talent, regardless of experience, we can manipulate and train and teach those individuals to do whatever the heck you're selling. I mean, there's software people in this room, there's non-software people in this room, there's hardware, there's peripherals, there's semiconductor. We can teach you that. There is curriculum to do that. But I still don't have the ability to manipulate DNA.
I think everybody wants to know, because I hope that all of you guys go back to your businesses and talk a little bit about this with your clients. Was there a specific piece of data that Natalie and her team presented to you that made you think, all right, I'll try this, I'll give it a go?
Well, the results never lie in sales, right? At some point, the numbers ultimately play out. And when you take a look at the 100 top AEs that we have, and we then did the empirical data mold against it, which said that 34% of those people came from non-traditional. I mean, 34 is a hard number to ignore. You know, we've all done thousands and thousands of interviews in our career. And if you think that 34% of those maybe could have gone a little bit better because maybe you opened your eyes a little bit and brought someone new in that maybe you would have just chucked their resume to the side, that's a huge time save. It has huge productivity implications on the back end. So that 34% just hit me square in the nose, and I'm really glad I've kind of, taken it on and really embraced it.
All right, thank you. Don't go be recruiting him. He's our favorite. He's staying at Salesforce. But thank you. I really appreciate it. All right, Ernest, talk to us a little bit more about some of the insights.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Christian. I think really what Christian is saying is, you can teach certain skill sets, you can teach certain things, but there's that DNA element, there's that cultural element that really is hard to teach, right? And that what we have to source for, right? And so what we did is we really started to think about, how we look at candidates. And what we did is we led with data again. And what we did is we looked at our top leaders in our company, and we ran all these various psychometric assessments on them and other tests and things like that, and really consolidated all of that information, distilled it down into these core characteristics that you see up here. What you don't see up here is you don't see technical skills or, other type of hard, metrics. What you see is really human type characteristics. You see aloha spirit, you see passion, you see teamwork. Those are the things that really set apart a great Salesforce employee from a not so great Salesforce employee, right? And so what we did with this with this data was we constructed an entire program around it called the Salesforce Ambassador Program, where someone not from your line of business will come in and interview your candidate on these skills and on these sort of characteristics, and they have the ultimate veto power, right? They can say this person is not a Salesforce employee, right? And Anna, I think, can attest to really just how disruptive this idea is. Please.
Well, I got to tell you that Susanna Delasanti and Jill Bone on my team actually implemented this program with their groups. And at first, it went over like a turd in the punch bowl. I mean, people weren't loving this. We were not winning any popularity contests. To have a group that's totally not affiliated with yours to come in and to say no, that's hard. But at the end of the day, what Salesforce is really, really known for is being an extraordinary company and a great culture. The company has a lot of soul. And as we grow from 15,000 employees to 20,000 employees next year, we know that preserving our culture is really, truly our number one. It's our number one asset. It's the number one thing we need to do. So with a lot of executive sponsorship, it did take some lobbying. The program has got legs now, and it's being well implemented. And frankly, I think that candidates actually appreciate it too. I mean, they don't want to work with jerks. I mean, they want to work with nice people as well. And so they want a chance to talk to as many people as possible.
Exactly. And so with this, with all the hard work that we've done to establish this new process, disrupt this process, really focus on culture, what we wanted to do is not leave anything to chance, right? And so I think everybody can think back about your own onboarding experience and how potentially not enjoyable it was, right? Where you're just thrown into the deep end of the pool and say, figure it out, right? We didn't want that to happen because we put all of this investment already into, bringing these people in. And so what we've done is we've created this journey for all new hires from pre-hire to 1 year, where they're getting all of these messages, these automated emails with tips, tricks, content, culture, compliance emails, all of these things automatically sent to them at like a structured pace, right? And you would think that all of these emails would fall on deaf ears because you get bombarded with a whole bunch of emails on a daily basis once you start. But we actually have found that we have an 85% open rate. That is huge. That is 3 times the standard open rate of any sort of marketing metric, right? And then also we've run some of these like 90-day surveys, and we've seen a 0.5 increase in how people feel whether or not they're set up for success, right? That's huge, because now you have people who are truly engaged, truly like embodying the culture, assimilated to the company, where they essentially become champions for the company. And so what we found too is this is a great use case on sort of what happens when you really focus on culture. What you get is you get really engaged employees. You get really vocal employees. And so when we got number 7 on best places to work, that was a very exciting day for all of us. We completely dominated the social sphere. We had 3.5 million impressions on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. People were just super happy to share because they were really engaged. They loved the company. And that's what happens when you really pay it forward with culture, right? And it's during times like these where you reap the dividends, right? You get 330% increase in job board traffic. You get the highest applicant day ever in Salesforce history. And that really shows you really the power of culture and really focusing on culture, right? And so when we think about all of this data that we have and all of these other use cases and how to use data and how to lead with data, it's really about, doing this, but then also what are our next steps? And so our next steps at Salesforce is really integrating all of this data and really doing creative and interesting things like developing early warning systems for attrition or productivity and accurately forecasting against, headcount. So that's all of the stuff that you can do with the data that is sitting in your system. And so we're looking to take it to the next step in terms of how to disrupt using data. So I think when you hear these stories, you sort of really get a sense of how to use data, how to lead with data, how to use data to really have those constructive conversations with your business leaders, and go out and really change the game and change the conversation. I really hope that you enjoyed these 3 use cases about disrupting where, disrupting who, and disrupting how you recruit. And so if you have any questions, there are 2 microphones up there. Please feel free to come up and ask us any questions that you might have.
Can you give us some specifics on that early warning attrition system?
Yes. So it is a Bayesian inference model with a Cox proportional hazard model. And so we have created actually an ensemble model for that. So we take in multiple data sources from Salesforce, from our HRIS, from our ATS, from all of the various data systems that we have, and we crunch it in these big, hairy, complex statistical models. And so we end up getting individual level likelihoods of attrition.
Question about data, and hi Anna, best boss in the world. So data, when presenting to managers, what key points and how to present this data, the key data points, and how would you present them to your managers?
I think you definitely need to let them in on the big secret, right? So at some point or another, in both of the scenarios that I mentioned, we understood the decline rates. We also were starting to see profiles that were being rejected by our hiring managers, but we knew were being hired by our competitors. And so those were two major beacons for us, is to go back and to show them the names, to show them where these people were going and where they tripped up in our interview process. And so that really led to the discussion. And I think that if you, as much as you can, be inclusive about what you're doing, they're there to help you. I mean, one thing I always tell my managers, and they couldn't agree more, is we have a common goal here, right? You want to hire the best, and I want to bring you the best. And so bringing them into the discussion, I think, is really key. Thanks, Carmen.
Wondering if you could talk about, one, what tools you're using to collect and analyze the data in terms of like infrastructure, and also how you go about prioritizing what to analyze and when.
Sure. So infrastructure-wise, we have a MySQL database that we've constructed, and we use various Python scripts to bring the data into our server, and we use SQL to query the data. So that's sort of from an infrastructure side. When it comes to prioritizing our tasks and how we analyze the data, it really is about going to the business and listening to the business and seeing what's key. And so when it comes to sales, you know, that's critical for our business. And so any type of sales analyses or things like that is always prioritized. And so it really is about listening to the business, listening to what our business leaders need, and then trying to utilize the data that we have to really answer and provide insights to help them drive their business decisions.
So as you were expanding the sales profile, you talked about those intangibles that makes for a really strong sales rep. What were you doing in the interview process? Questions, maybe implementing a new step outside of the culture piece that allowed you to determine if they were the right fit?
Yeah, it's a great question, because what we found in the interview process is that we had a very structured thing where you had your 10 questions that you kind of asked, and a good candidate could kind of manipulate their way around that and kind of game the system, if you will. And so what we really did is we started to drive towards more of a storytelling, or make them comfortable in their own skin. Just doesn't matter whether they were selling Dolce & Gabbana or they were selling Oracle databases. Tell me a story about the last time you screwed up a deal, and just leave it there, right? And just open-ended question. And let that candidate just kind of run whichever way that they wanted to run. And that allows you to really identify a lot about someone. Because if they can tell a good story about when they screwed something up, chances are they can take Salesforce, which is pretty darn good, and make a good story out of that. So that's the idea here. And so what we would do is come up with these tremendously open-ended questions. We'd oftentimes do case studies. That's a big step that we've employed in our interview process. Instead of it just being, okay, I'm going to sit across from a hiring manager and get, bludgeoned to death with questions, let's just have them study a case study for a little while and present it back to us as though they were a salesperson. And it's amazing to see how those true colors come out. And we just let them know that it's okay to not know enough about Salesforce, but if you can run a meeting, if you can speak with authority, you can kind of weave some tale, you can build rapport with us in the room, those are the things we're looking for. We can teach you Salesforce. So it was really just kind of taking it out of that traditional mold of interviewing and making it more about telling a story and really just connecting with our customers and connecting with our employees. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, I'll admit, the things about your culture are very impressive. But getting top talented, this top 20% of salespeople, is really difficult. So once you get these great people, how do you keep them? How do you make them not go anywhere else?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that Ernest showed is getting them in the front door, as we talked about, is half of it. I would even say in some cases it's less than half. It's really making sure that they feel empowered the entire way through. Because we've all seen the situation, salesperson shows up on day one, there's your account list, there's the phone, get to work, right? And that's just, unfortunately, that's not the way that it works. So what we've really done is these really regimented tag-up points along the way. And we've introduced this whole concept of DMJ, or do my job training. Because oftentimes people show up, and again, you get the phone book and you get the phone, they say, okay, go to work. You're like, what do I do? So what we've been doing is just really having these regular touch bases where we're able to make sure that they start very simple. There's the bathroom, there's the drinking fountain, and then we kind of work more and more through it. All the way up to, I think we have 180-day touch points now. So we've just really created kind of a programmatic way of going about it as opposed to just kind of a willy-nilly way. So it's been highly effective.
Thank you.
By hiring top recruiters out of different industries, is my guess that in doing so, you're having them basically throw their Rolodex out. That's no longer really anything that you're looking for. So I'm curious to know, have you had to bolster your academy? What have you had to do aside from touch points, to educate people in brand new industries and be effective?
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly have, and you guys can probably speak to Salesforce University, but you're right. It's you are really trading in all that hard work that you've done in whatever industry you've done that in, and you're embarking on a new career inside of Salesforce. What we try to do, though, is we try to match up the industry that you came with towards the customers that you'll be selling into. So you may be selling something different, but you can talk to them because you've walked a mile in their shoes. So Salesforce, for example, is in the middle of a huge transformation around selling to industries, healthcare, retail, financial services. And so we're pulling people out of those industries that maybe have to jeopardize all their past contacts, but they can walk in and speak with a level of credibility that no software salesperson that we yanked off the street ever can. So, and it doesn't always work, trust me. I mean, we have, I told the story about the Dolce & Gabbana guy. I've got another guy, the last job he had was selling chocolate. He's like my number 2 guy. And I mean, this is a great story. I mean, it's crazy because the guy was literally selling chocolate into Target. And he was competing against Ghirardelli and Hershey and all those other guys. And he had this little niche product. And I looked at myself and I said, if this guy can sell chocolate into Target and compete against Hershey's, he should be able to sling software pretty effectively because it's really not that complex. So, I think there's some. You always can't do that. You always can't match people up with the exact industry that they come out of, especially if you have general geography-based territories. And in that case, what you have to do is you have to ramp up your use cases, all those, the case studies around. You have to really, really memorialize all of your stories within those particular industries to make sure that they can get a lot better. No.
Hi. I would love to say that my organization now has the ability to pull reports where we can consolidate data and look at years of experience, company size, whether we've reached out to them as a recruiting team, whether they follow us on social media. Unfortunately, I imagine for a lot of us in the room, that's not something we currently have the capabilities of doing. From your perspective, what are kind of some starting points in terms of us looking at wanting to provide true value and true insight to our hiring teams? Where do you recommend, without those systems, some of the baseline things that we do start to look at?
I mean, I would say that here's a plug for LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has helped us on a lot of these types of analyses in terms of doing some basic, how many people have you touched, all of that kind of stuff. That's, at least for us, that's something that LinkedIn has provided for us as a global account for them. And so it's really about leveraging, I think, the resources that you have and starting small and starting from a place where you can get some of those quick wins. So it's not all about consolidating everything together, bringing everything together. It's really about creating those quick wins in terms of how to use data and building that momentum to really start getting buy-in for that data. Then you can start to really invest in a team that can, build everything together. So, I was a team of like 2 for like the past, 3 years, and now my team is a team of 6. So that's because we made those really small, quick wins and started building momentum. And I think that's really where you can start. Anything else? Any other questions? There will be a survey that comes out as well, so please fill out the survey. That would be great to have some feedback on the session. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.